Hello and good evening. Thank you so much for joining this online virtual film screening of The Chosen. My name is Tony Gapistone. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I am from BraveMaker. I'm the executive director, headquartered in Redwood City. BraveMaker is a 501c3 nonprofit arts organization. We believe that the power of film can change lives to elevate brave stories for justice, diversity, and inclusion. That's our mission, and I'm so glad that I get to partner in this event. And I want to introduce to you the mind and the coordination behind this event, Pamela Estes from the San Mateo County Human Trafficking Program. Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you, Tony. Thanks for your help here tonight. So I just want to thank everybody who's listening here tonight, and thank you for your interest in learning more about human trafficking. Human trafficking is a crime that the whole entire community needs to be involved with. We all need to have our ears and eyes open to what trafficking looks like so we can all play a role in helping prevent it and also intervene. I also want to acknowledge and thank our co-sponsors tonight, BraveMaker, the Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition, Dignity Health Sequoia Hospital, and the South Bay Coalition to End Human Trafficking. I'm going to give you a little background about the film. The film that we're going to show tonight is titled Chosen. It was produced by a nonprofit named Shared Hope International. Shared Hope is dedicated to bringing an end to sex trafficking through prevention, restoration, and justice. The film was released in 2012. But despite the fact that it's a decade old, the tactics of traffickers revealed in the film are still relevant today. The film is the true story of two teenage girls who were tricked by traffickers. The girls that you'll see in the film, one is named Brianna. The other one, whose the image is going to be obscured, is named Lacey. They will share how traffickers targeted, groomed, and manipulated them for the purpose of sex trafficking. The film is about 20 minutes in length, and then we'll move to our panel discussion. We want to warn you in advance that some of the content may have a negative impact on some participants, so please consider how you need to take care of yourself. The film Chosen and a short video that we will play during the panel discussion discusses child predation and also makes references to sexual content. So as I mentioned, following the film, we hope you'll stay for the panel discussion. And it's going to be led by JEREMY LATTA, who's Social Work Supervisor for Children and Family Services in San Mateo County. So thank you so much, Jeremy, for being here and for moderating the panel after the film.
Thank you, Pamela. As Pamela said, my name is JEREMY LATTA. I work with San Mateo County Children and Family Services in our commercially sexually exploited children's program. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight to help learn more about this issue. And as Pamela said, it's truly a full community effort that's needed to address human trafficking and exploitation. And so we appreciate all of you being here. Please do stay on after the film, though. We will have a panel discussion with experts from the field to really learn more about how trafficking and exploitation affects our community here in the Bay Area and what you can do to help address it. Without further ado, we'll get started with our film, Chosen.
we're working with what we have. And I was like, what do we have? And she's like, your body.
I didn't know about sex trafficking until I was in the middle of it.
After a while, you just kind of get used to it. Like, everything that goes around just doesn't seem out of ordinary to you.
We really believe that she was getting ready to be sold.
So, Brianna, how old are you?
500 kids taking welcome to Let me join in!
Whenever you're missing the kids.
I think the most common way we've seen these traffickers or pimps get involved in these girls' lives is they pretend to be an older boyfriend. And really, again, we're talking about young girls that could be 12, 13, 14 years old, and perhaps they've never had a boyfriend. So to have this older male come into their life who's pretty charming, who's pretty charismatic, and suddenly paying attention to them like they've never had it before, offering to buy them things, offering to take them to dinner, to movies, have their hair done, their nails done, a tanning salon. This connection's made, and these young girls actually fall in love with these guys and believe that this guy loves them back. And then one day he asks for something, and even though she doesn't want to do it, she's so worried about losing him that she will. And once he's had her do it once, he pretty much can control her from then on, through shame, through drugs, through threats about family or physical beatings. But the reality is it can be any girl. And we've learned that through experience, unfortunately, that girls from good homes, girls that have good grades, do all the right things, can still be exposed to this. The 17-year-old girl that I'm familiar with, her name is Brianna. And Brianna comes from a small town, was an A student, an athlete, volunteered in her community, was a cheerleader, and attended college while going to high school. And she came into my life through a phone call I received on a Saturday night.
My name's Brianna, and I didn't know about sex trafficking until I was in the middle of it. I'm sure you're like me, where you think that sex trafficking wouldn't affect your life, but I'll tell you my story. I was from a small town and just really enjoyed being a part of the community. When I was in high school, I actually took college courses because I knew that I wanted to be a nurse. I was really excited about getting my education started, and I knew that I could really focus myself while I was in high school to get those A's I needed in college. I was waitressing and just doing a good job. I was always really friendly and would have conversations with my customers. What I didn't realize was that one of my customers, he was gathering information about me through our innocent conversations, where I was going to school, what my family was like, what I wanted to be. He was gathering information about me to eventually use it against me. I was just at work one evening, and some guys came in, and they were really cool. One, his name was Nick, and he was like 24. He played football at a university. He was tall and blonde, and he was super funny. We were just like laughing the entire time that he was having his meal. He told me that he was from Seattle, which I thought was just a coincidence. And I told him that, wow, I want to move there. And we were just flirting the whole time, and he was telling me how beautiful I am and making me feel good about myself. At the end of the conversation with Nick, he gave me his phone number, and we talked for quite a bit of time. I made a choice that night, but I found out that they actually had chosen me. When I decided to go up and hang out with Nick in Seattle, I couldn't tell my parents because they wouldn't let me. So since he was older, I had to make a lie to get around my parents. So I told them that I was going to hang out with my girlfriend for the day. When I got to Seattle, I pulled up to a gorgeous house. It was Victorian style and it had a lake view. I was blown away. I didn't realize that when I was meeting his friends, they were actually shopping me. And they were seeing if they wanted to buy me or if they knew somebody that might want to buy me. So I didn't realize that his friends were traffickers too. And he was so smooth and came off so sincere and genuine. When I asked him, how am I going to get a job? What am I going to do? He said, you could waitress. You're good at that. I saw you waitressing. You're good at that. But how much do you usually make in a night? And I told him that I usually make about $85. He told me to put a 0 on that 85, and that's how much I could bring in a night with a job that he knew of. He told me that his ex-girlfriend was a dancer and that it was really easy and that I could probably do it. And for a minute I considered dancing. I was thinking, well, probably isn't that bad. And then he said, okay, let's go to the strip club. I felt like if I didn't go to the strip club with him, that he would look at me as just a child, as a kid. Here I am, I'm 18. I can go into a strip club at this point. And it was kind of like, if you don't, then you're not an adult. That's how I felt. The strip club was just really loud and dark. It was gross and it smelled. It didn't feel very comfortable, and it's like everything has this like sticky look to it. You don't really want to touch anything because everything's got germs on it. I felt kind of gross that I was even in there. I was only in the club for 2 nights dancing, but in that time frame, a lot of guys wanted to take me home. And one guy, he offered me $1,000 for an hour, and I couldn't believe it. So me and Nick talked about going to Arizona, and we both decided that I needed to return my dad's car. On my way to return my dad's car, I was calling friends to help me move out and get the car returned and then get me back up to Seattle. So the only friend that offered to help was my ex-boyfriend, and his name was Evan. I was surprised that he was going to help, but we just kept a really close relationship. We were good friends still. So when I got to his house, though, he was asking me so many questions. Evan was so concerned about where did they get all this money and why aren't they working. He was asking just these questions, and I was starting to realize that he didn't really want to help me. And then I realized that he was trying to talk me out of going to Arizona and moving out. And so I wanted to go. I wanted to leave. So on my way of walking out of Evan's door, his parents were there. I felt like Evan betrayed me because he called his parents and my parents to try to help convince me not to go to Arizona and not to move out. And, here I am, given all these opportunities to go to school in Seattle. I felt like it was a dream come true. I was going to Arizona for winter break, and they all didn't see it. I felt like my family and Evan, they wanted to keep me just in this little bubble and that I'm just a child and I don't really know what I'm doing. So I was upset. I was really mad at Evan. I felt like he completely was ruining our friendship. He had lost my trust. And a woman walked into the room and introduced herself. Her name was Linda Smith, and she was a specialist in getting girls to recognize and flee from human trafficking. After a long conversation with Linda, I started realizing and recognizing that I was being groomed for trafficking, that I was in the middle of the process, and that it was almost too late. I thought Nick was the good guy and Evan was the bad guy, but now I realize he saved my life. Nick was grooming me to be trafficked. I started getting angry and upset. Linda, from all the stories that she was telling me, she told me one about a 13-year-old girl who was tricked on the night of her birthday.
Monday through Friday, never wanted to miss school. I love school, I love being around my friends, and my science class was my big thing. We were walking down the street, coming back from the little corner store, and there was these white guys out there, saying, yeah, there's a party. You guys should really come, and you guys would have fun. We were like, okay, well, we're going into 8th grade, we might as well get our first party out. Let's just go have fun. It was just a quiet neighborhood. And so we were like, it's cool. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? So we were like, yeah, this is harmless. It's one of those ones you see in a movie. It was fun. And I was sitting on the couch just listening to music. My friends were off dancing and stuff. And some really cute guy comes up and starts talking to me. And I'm just sitting there. He was really persistent on talking to me and trying to get to know me. He was 20, 23 or something like that. I was at Starbucks ordering a drink, and he had said, hey, do you remember me? And I was like, nope, sorry, nope, don't remember you. And he's like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure I remember you. I was like, okay, whatever. So I gave him my number, and we talked for a little bit and hang out, and we go to movies and malls, trips and stuff like that. And it was pretty cool. I'd never had a boyfriend before, so it was cool. He bought me a dress, and it was just really special to me. It was I felt like I was a princess, a queen or something. And he used to call me his queen. I started thinking, he really did like me, and listening to all the dreams he was trying to sell. He wants to marry me and stuff like that. And he can't wait for us to move in together and have a life. He kept saying that he needed money and he was going to lose his cars and his house and stuff, and he's not going to have anywhere to go. So I was like, I'll help you, whatever. And so we went to the strip club, and it was just super uncomfortable. So I went out of the room, and he started yelling at me, and I was like, I'm not doing that. I want to go home. And he wouldn't let me go home till my shift was over. I was 13 when I started in the strip clubs. I signed up for track, and during track, I'd just kind of not go, and I'd go spend them with him or whatever. And then I started going to strip clubs for him, and what I'd do is we'd go to school on the bus, and then right when I got off the bus, I'd just kind of leave and go meet him down the street or something. And then just as the buses were pulling up, I'd be back on the bus, so it was I went to school. And I'd leave for weekends saying I'm at my friend's house, and whenever my mom would call on my friend's phone, we'd just three-way call it so it sounded like we were together, because my friends would cover for me. I was on the phone with him, and he was cussing me out, saying he didn't know why I even bothered with school. I wasn't going to be anything because that's who I am. And I hung up the phone, and I like kind of dropped a couple tears. And I had this friend, Jordan, and she was like, you know, why would you believe somebody saying that they love you when they treat you? And I really didn't have an answer for that back then. He loves me. That's all I could really think in my head. And that night, my first night, I got in the car with 3 people. They were all like in their 40s and 50s, maybe older. Like, I don't know, I puked for about 30 minutes. Most of like my tricks and stuff were kind of old. I was scared, I was nervous. I didn't want to do it, but I couldn't come back without any money. He's kind of a very physical kind of person. He, like, you mess up something, he'll slap you, or, you know, depending on what you did, he'll like choke you out.
They were threatening to go get her 10-year-old sister. They were threatening to go beat up her family. And they had taken video of Lacey being raped the first night and threatened that they were going to use video of her having sex with other men to show to her youth group and to show to her school. She wouldn't have felt like she belonged anywhere. She didn't feel like she belonged with her pimp, but she wasn't safe going home. I just didn't know about trafficking and that there were older men preying on teenagers to bring them to a market, to sell them. Traffickers go anywhere that there's a large group of girls or that girls frequent, like the mall or Starbucks. They'll go to arcades, anywhere that teenagers like to hang out at, parks, restaurants. Signs that you can watch out for your friends would be small tattoos or a tattoo of a name. Maybe your friend has an older boyfriend that she's trying to keep a secret, or she has new clothes that are really expensive, like a $300 purse or a really nice jacket. If your friend asks you to cover for her, don't do it. You're not doing her a favor. You could be helping her destroy her own life. And just like her, you don't know that what she's doing is so dangerous, but you'll never see her again. So what can we do to fight sex trafficking? I think the most important thing that we can do is get the word out. The only way to protect girls from sex trafficking is to be educated on what sex trafficking looks like. If you can't recognize the signs, you're not going to save your friend.
I think Evan was a true defender of Brianna. You know, he took a chance. He stepped out. He told the truth. He told what was going on with her. He violated her trust in the interest of protecting her. And I think that's a good lesson for us. Had he not done that, we might not have Brianna here with us today. I think what's important to understand is that these pimps have studied, preyed upon, stalked these girls. They do know where they live. They do know about their family. And when they threaten these girls don't feel safe. They don't feel that they have the ability to return home. And that was one of the questions we used to struggle with is, if this girl was doing something she didn't want to do, why wouldn't she just leave? And the fact is they can't see their way out of it. They don't see a safe way out of it. I would want to make sure that you understand where these guys are at. They're at your malls. They're at your stores. They're at places where kids congregate. Really, probably the biggest key is these older boyfriends. You heard Brianna talking about it. An older, mid-20s male has no business being around 13, 14-year-old girls, or even up to 18-year-old girls. So protect your friends. When we look back at Lacey's friends who really could have intervened at different points in her life and didn't, she's never seen those friends again. So the fact they thought maybe they were protecting her at the time really never helped her, and they've never been around in her life since.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to open up with our panel discussion now. So thank you to all of our panel members for being here to help us be able to.
So sorry. Hold on a second. Stand by as I bring everybody back in here. Jeremy is coming right back. There he is.
Sorry, so not sure if we heard all this, but thank you to all of our panel members for being here. We're going to now take a little more of a deep look at some of the issues raised in the movie Chosen. To start us off, Lori, can you tell us a little bit about grooming? The movie really focused on some of it, but can you tell us how you define grooming of children?
Hi, thank you, Jeremy, and thank you everybody for joining us. Yeah, simply put, grooming is the process a human trafficker and or abuser uses to identify victims, target them, gain their trust, with the purpose of ultimately, controlling them for human trafficking or other forms of exploitation.
Before we go further in the subject, Sergeant Lee, can you give us a definition of what human trafficking is?
Yes, thank you. Human trafficking is the modern day slavery, a crime that involves compelling or coercing a person to provide labor or services or to engage in commercial sex acts. The coercion could be subtle, overt, physical, or psychological. Minors induced into commercial sex are human trafficking victims regardless of force, fear, or coercion.
Janae, Sergeant Lee told us a little bit about how the commercial sex exploitation of children differs from human trafficking. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the factors that go into it when we talk about commercial sexual exploitation of children?
Sure. When we're talking about CSEC, or commercial sexual exploitation of children, as Sergeant Lee described, we don't need to see the same elements as trafficked adults. So you don't have to have or be able to prove force, fraud, or coercion. And we also see exchanges for sex acts can be for things other than money. The other thing that I think is really key to this conversation in this movie, they did a great job depicting traffickers, but I can tell you when we're talking about in the last 10 years since the film was came out, I can tell you I've seen a lot more female students or children who have been serving as traffickers, and the grooming can come about in ways that are really subtle, especially when one thinks that they're also not only maybe a significant other, but also a good friend or a best friend.
As Janae just spoke about, and we saw in the movie with Brianna and Lacey, sometimes the traffickers can appear to be an older boyfriend and just be striking up innocent conversations and engaging in time sort of speaking and connecting with them, or even through customers like we saw with Brianna at the restaurant. But there are other techniques used. Umar, could you tell us a little bit more about what some of the techniques that traffickers may use to groom victims?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jeremy, and thanks for everyone being here this evening. I just want to put out another trigger warning for things that I may share. And so to answer this question, abusers and traffickers are very intentional and high functioning with seek, identify, study, and target those that they want to victimize. And while anyone can have vulnerabilities, traffickers choose to manipulate these vulnerabilities to their advantage. And so in the film that you all just watched, as Brianna described Nick, of gathering different informations that he used against her, traffickers, pimps, abusers, they will converse and interact with those they are seeking to victimize in ways that seem normal, and this is their way of studying and learning basic kind of information about your family and just different ways that they can connect with you. So traffickers will gain your trust, and they will also isolate you, and this is where those vulnerabilities are easier to manipulate and take advantage of. And I will talk about the different tactics later on as well. And I just want to also share that with my personal story. So I am a C-sex survivor. I was sexually exploited at 14 years old, and so the boyfriend tactic was my story and how what I experienced. And in that situation, these things that I mentioned were used as far as uh, being isolated. Um, a guy, he was 18 or 19 at the time, and it didn't seem like there was anything wrong with that because of the family situation that was occurring for me growing up in a house with an abusive father. And so with this guy, it just seemed like he was a person that cared. There was never physical abuse that happened. And so that manipulation tactic is so powerful, and just one of those ways that traffickers can identify as a way to manipulate people.
Thank you, Irma, for sharing that and part of your story with us. Lori, maybe you can speak to that. Sometimes, as was talked about in the movie, there could be a perception that there's some consensual acts going on, or that the victims are involved with or agreeing to things that are going on with the exploitation or from the trafficker. Can you talk to us about how that can look from the outside and really what the appearance of consent means?
Sure. Well, I think the first thing that we should all keep in mind as adults is that any child under, any minor, anybody under the age of 18 cannot legally consent to sexual acts. So, you know, especially, I mean, you know, we always know about peer-to-peer sex happening with teens, but when an adult is present, that's even more so illegal. And so it doesn't really matter the way that they're actually appearing to present in this exploitation. It's illegal and they're victims. And so, you know, through the process of grooming, there's a whole lot of manipulation that happens. There's a whole lot of trust that is gained by their exploiters and their perpetrators. And so, at the end of the day, legally, they are victims and they're being trafficked. So, so it's not consensual.
Sergeant Lee, can you talk to us a little bit about who's at risk of being groomed and if there are certain groups that are more vulnerable?
Sure, thank you. So anybody can be groomed for trafficking, teens, adults, men and women. Like you said, some groups are at higher risk than others, such as undocumented persons, basically for fear of law enforcement. Economic vulnerabilities, people who are on survival mode, runaway teens, teens in group homes and foster care. Remember that traffickers are masters of manipulation, and they'll target their victims who need basic human needs. Everybody needs, basic human needs such as food, water, and shelter. For example, in the film, Brianna, she came from a supportive family. She attended school, took college courses, had a job. And even with all this, she was groomed to do sex trafficking by someone she looked up to. Lacey, who was a 13-year-old student, attended a party and she was introduced to sex trafficking when her parents thought she was attending school, catching the bus. Instead, she was in the life of trafficking, unfortunately. So bottom line is anyone can be groomed and trafficked.
In Hollywood, there's often an image portrayed of trafficking victims being abducted by someone they don't know, kidnapped, taken away, and forced into exploitation. But that's not always the typical way that it happens. Umar, can you talk to us a little bit more about some of the ways that traffickers can use to exploit their victims?
Yes. So I think it's so important to highlight that when we look at what's on the media, and even when we search human trafficking and we see the images that come up in Google search with the chains or this image that was circulated frequently on Instagram and Facebook of the white van abduction, that while that can happen, that is more of what's rare. And it does make it very harmful to continue these ideas that this is what human trafficking looks like, because then we are not able to really identify what the tactics are. So utilizing and manipulating utilizing and manipulating trust. And so when a trafficker or abuser, when they create this bond with a person, they've worked on building that bond with you so that they can convince you into trafficking. And there can be the different ways that they suggest that it could be a quick fix to with if you have needs, your needs for money, or in portraying trafficking as something that is a lot lighter than what it is, that is something that you won't be involved in for very long. And trafficking can really happen anywhere. It can happen at home. There's familial trafficking, where it occurs with a family member, and while you're attending school, we have to be careful with peers. Also, with traffickers will try to take advantage and use friends to recruit their other friends. And in the film, it spoke about Lacey skipping school, and her parents didn't know that she was leaving off of campus. And so these are the kind of bonds that can be created that is not just on the surface, things that you can't see. So a lot of ways that trafficking can happen in subtle ways, and it often happens with a person that you trust, a person that you're close with, instead of it being a stranger. And it's also important to mention that anyone can be a trafficker, male, women, or even youth.
In the film, the officers discusses how that traffickers are going to be anywhere where kids are, where they go to malls, they go to places where kids congregate. But another place that especially has taken rise in the past few years is online. And so traffickers can target youth online as well for exploitation. So we're going to watch a short video clip to really demonstrate about the dangers online, and then talk some more about how that can be addressed as well.
Allegedly raping a 15.
We made a plan.
A man has been arrested for allegedly raping a 15-year-old that he met over Snapchat.
Instagram has become the #1 social media site.
At the top of the free download.
We've also seen firsthand the predatory symbiotic relationship that exists between Instagram and Snapchat.
We would create a fictitious 15-year-old girl, complete with a believable social media identity, put her online, and document how long it would take for a predator to approach her. But creating a person out of thin air is complicated. We needed photos, but we knew we couldn't use an actual teenager. It would have to be someone on our team. I'm 37, but our graphic designers assured me that with the wonders of photo manipulation, they could magically make me look over 2 decades younger. We bought clothes and accessories, studied body language and facial expressions. We methodically covered and edited signs of aging, wrinkles, weight shifts, and stretch marks. Meanwhile, we coordinated with federal, state, and local law enforcement. Then we built a story around her, a history, a family, a social circle. Libby was born in 2004 and is a sophomore who recently moved to Indiana. We created multiple online accounts for Libby, prominently displayed her age, and posted typical teen content. We even created virtual friends for Libby who would comment on her posts. With everything in place, we would launch the project, give it a few months, and see if anyone would buy it. So we hit the button, and Libby went live. Within the first hour of posting on Libby's accounts, 7 adult men contacted her. By the end of 9 days, that number was 92. The conversations ranged in severity from making sexual comments to sharing and requesting explicit photos and videos to manipulation and threats. The onslaught was so massive, it took 5 of us playing Libby full-time to keep up. We decided to move off-site where we could scale up the operation and gather as much information and evidence as possible. Since Libby is 15, men might try to falsely justify their actions towards her because of her proximity to adulthood. Would parents question, where's the bar? Would a 13-year-old face the same barrage of predators? A 12-year-old? How young could it possibly go? The graphics team transformed me into 11-year-old Bailey. Bailey is afraid of the dark. She hasn't had her first crush yet. She's still prepubescent. A parent might assume Bailey would be insulated from any sort of predatory attack. We launched our 11-year-old persona online.
444 and go. One like from a guy whose profile photo is a penis.
So
let's say
1 minute and 7 seconds. We have a message request.
Although sorry, 2 more requests just came in. How much time? 1 minute and 40 seconds?
Yeah.
How
old are you? You go to the profile, you know that is a child. It also says in the profile that the child is in 6th grade.
Another one.
It's just lighting up. Like the inbox is just boom, 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 boom.
An incoming video call in less than 5 minutes.
So there is more to that video. We just wanted to show you a brief clip to kind of give you a sense of things, but we'll be sharing the link for those who want to see more of that later, if they want to learn more about the work. But in the video, we really saw how quick and how persistent people can be when approaching children online for sexual acts. And so, Lori, can you talk to us a little bit about what can parents and caregivers do to keep their children safe online and other situations from predators?
Sure. I think the biggest piece of advice would be to, talk to your kids, try to have that open dialogue with them before they're even online. I know that it gets younger and younger these days, so it's hard to think about doing that at a really young age, but just, letting them know that you're available to talk, that you want to be involved in their online lives, you want to know who they're communicating with, you want to know what apps they're using, and that, you all as a family approve of these apps. So, you could have lists of things that are do's and don'ts. And then, it's just important that they know they have a caring and trusting adult that they can come to when they experience something online that's uncomfortable, because it's not an if, it's really a when. I don't think I know any child who's been online who hasn't been, sent an inappropriate message. And just knowing that your child or, a child whose life you're involved with will come to you is huge. It's a huge factor in preventing and intervening in child sexual abuse.
Thank you, Lori. In Chosen, we learned about how that traffickers control people through shame, drugs, threats to family and friends. From Lacey's story, we saw that they were threatening to get her sister to hurt her family, to have exposed videotapes of being raped. But can you elaborate, Umar, on some of these tactics that are used by traffickers to control victims?
Yes. So in addition to what you've seen on the film and what Jeremy has described, just like what was also mentioned with the youth knowing who they can turn to, who they can speak to, that's so important, because this is where shame and guilt can occur, and where trafficker can use that to their advantage. With if the youth doesn't feel like they can open up to somebody with what they're experiencing, or they may be questioning, like, this doesn't feel right, but there's no one for them to speak to, then that puts them in a dangerous position. And also the trafficker can really use that to their advantage of making threats that they will tell their family of what they've done, or even using their family against them. There's a survivor leader by the name of Rachel Thomas, and she shares her story of how there was a modeling agency. She thought that she was getting into an honest contract. And so when she signed the W-2, this was where the trafficker was able to take that information, take the personal information that she had with the address, and he threatened her family, threatened that he would harm her family. So uh, those are some of the ways. And then isolation, again, is so important to speak about, because when a trafficker takes you away physically from the people around you that care about you, or anyone that can help identify the harms that you may be in. So they may move you to a different city or a different state. That's what happened in my situation also. So I grew up in Oakland, and then we lived in Stockton. I was moved to Stockton, and that's about an hour away or so, but it was far enough to separate me from my family. And so a lot of things can go under the radar with that. And then trauma bond is something else that's really important to talk about. And this is where that bond is being created between the person who's victimized and the trafficker. And it often happens, it's like a process of rewiring you neurologically, where you have your different experiences of high intensities of good experience, positive feelings, and that gets mixed in with the negative things. And that's where you are breaking down a person and dehumanizing them occurs. But a person becomes confused and difficult to identify that harm they are in, because they are connected to this person that is creating the trauma. And the only way to break this trauma bond is to remove yourself from it, and to stay away from that person, so that they are not having that kind of power and control over you. And so what Brianna described in the video also as being groomed is also what trauma bonding looks like, where she started to feel like the people around her were no longer people that she trusted anymore, or that they had bad intentions towards her. So you feel disconnected from the people who you can trust, and it just becomes a world between you and the trafficker. And so false promises is also another way where trafficking occurs. And again, with my situation, it was I met the guy who ended up trafficking me. I was 14, I say, and ended up trafficking me because when I was 17, that's where the first trafficking experience happened between me and him. And so this was very manipulative and calculative for who I thought was my boyfriend. And a lot of traffickers also use this as a tactic in being able to really control a person by holding on, like waiting those years, taking that time throughout those years. And that creates an even stronger bond between the two, where in my situation, I wouldn't question anything that he said, he suggested, because of the time that he he took to really create that. So those are some of the ways, and also threats and withholding people of their documentation.
Thank you, Uma. So there are different ways that the exploitation can look. Janae, can you talk to us about some examples of how exploitation may appear and what acts may be done to exploit a youth?
Sure, I'm happy to. So one of the ways that we can see the acts of CSEC looking is clearly in commercial sex acts. That's one way it plays out. Also pornography, and also forcing youth to make sexually explicit videos in their own home and sell them. And sometimes it can be in forcing the youth to make them, but also, as the example that we heard in the story earlier of Lacey, sometimes videos are taken and then they are held, they are sold, and they are also held, as we would call, for sextortion to further perpetuate the victimization of the target in the video. And one of the things I'd like to say, I so appreciated what Lori and Umra were saying about the ways in which we can support our young people, our students, and Umra did such a good job talking about the role of schools. One of the things I'd like to add, and this is something that has become much more common lately, is as I've been working with young children or students who have been victims, they've had a theme of talking about, while they knew in some cases that they could turn to parents, in other cases they didn't. Oftentimes it was a school official or somebody in their broader environment, maybe in their faith community. And I'm really proud of the work we've done to train folks to be able to recognize and intervene and support young people. But one of the other things I've heard a lot is that the fear of judgment. So whether it's you're here as a parent or guardian or as a professional, just to be really mindful that our young people already oftentimes feel the shame and are very leery of having folks judge them. And so whether you're the professional or the parent, just keep that in mind as well as you're having conversations to keep your young people safe.
Thank you, Janae. In the film, Brianna talks about being educated on what sexual trafficking looks like, and if you can't recognize the signs, you can't save your friend. So it's important that we all know a little about what those signs are and what ways we can do. Umra, can you talk a little bit about ways that you could recognize sex trafficking and how you could intervene if you see something?
Absolutely. So, just like what she said in the video, education is absolutely crucial, and it's a starting point to becoming that supportive friend, parent, advocate, or provider. And so, when a young person is able to recognize who they can trust and without feeling like they are being judged, it's super imperative that they have that supportive circle that they can turn to. Just having that fear around opening up to someone. And so with us learning the accurate ways that trafficking looks like really helps prepare everyone to, and it opens your mind up to be able to remove those judgments. So education is very important, and just in the simple ways that you communicate about it and the language that you use around how you talk about and trafficking, of not placing blame or criminalizing, having those views upon the person, and really acknowledging that a person is victimized. So just our understanding around it and how we share that information among each other. And again, recognizing the signs so that some of the common beliefs and what's shared on the media, those false depictions and those is dangerous to continue passing on information that isn't accurate. And Also breaking down myths so we can properly identify those risks and who may be in danger of or are already being trafficked. And also identifying your local organizations is important, and not just identifying the first ones that you find, but ensuring that they are survivor inclusive is a good sign of whether the organization is trauma informed and how they are including survivors in leadership and making decisions and things within that organization. And also in the video, Brianna mentions signs of exploitation of where someone may have gotten a tattoo of a name, of barcodes, an older boyfriend. So things like that. And the tattoos is a way of branding a person. And oftentimes now, I think it's more so of names and that are being tattooed. And and with the older boyfriend, that's what happened in my case. So when there are people that can identify those things, then it may seem like a betrayal to that young person. But these are the ways that we are able to recognize and help bring those things up.
So as we're nearing a wrap up, I want to give each of our panel members a time to share some ways they think that the members that are attending this in the community can help support someone who they suspect is being groomed or exploited at this time. Sergeant Lee, would you mind starting us off with some recommendations you'd have for that?
Sure, thank you. As Umra described earlier, you got to be that friend. You have to act. You have to say something. There are certain secrets you can keep being in high school or middle school, whether you're a friend, sister, brother, mother, father, grandmother, grandparent, or uncle or aunt. This is something that if you see the signs, you have to address. I no longer want to go to a scene of a girl who's 14 years old that was sexually assaulted or worse, a victim of a homicide. So, you have to be that friend. You have to be strong, even if they get mad at you. Just like Brianna said, I believe his name was Evan. She thought that Evan was not supportive, but what he was doing was he recognized the signs and alerted the right people. So do the right thing. I know it's the hard thing to do, and sometimes doing the right thing is hard, but you don't want to look back and say, I wish I would have saved my friend. So act.
Thank you. Lori, what do you think are some things that people can do to support someone if they think they're being groomed or exploited?
Sure. I think, just as was just mentioned, take action in some way, but sometimes that action does look a little bit more subtle in that, you want to come from a place of caring and have them understand that you're really doing this because you care for them, not, because you want to make things more difficult for them or because, you want to, control them too, because that's a big aspect of what's already happening to them. So that it's coming from a place of care, you're not judging, you just want the best for them. And that, you're open to listening, that you can help, and that, there are other supports out there as a friend or as a parent or somebody, you don't have to do this alone. You can definitely call up our crisis line, talk to some of our sexual assault counselors, help process, what's going on, how to support. And then there are a bunch of other resources also, I think that Pamela is sharing.
Thank you, Lori. Janae, could you share some things that people can do and how the community can get involved if they suspect exploitation or grooming?
Sure, I'm happy to. And I so appreciate the comment about this being an informative session tonight in the movie, and are we going to show it in schools? We are doing human trafficking prevention work in schools as age appropriate ways. And so it varies depending on high school versus middle school, et cetera. And we are always open and love to partner with parent communities, et cetera, PTAs. So if you're somebody who would like to partner in bringing this to your local school, please feel free to reach out, and we'd love to partner. I really want to echo what Lori just shared and actually Sergeant Lee. I've worked with lots of students that were actively being groomed or actually were pulled into the life. And I'd like to point out that if you're someone, whether you're a student or an adult that's concerned about a student, or a young person that you think might currently being trafficked or is on the path there, seek your own support and your own expertise, because figuring this out and having those conversations isn't easy. One of the things that so impressed me about Brianna's story is her ex-boyfriend, Evan. He clearly had his own education, but he pulled in his own support mechanisms because sometimes we feel like we have to do it alone. And whatever dynamic it is, it's complicated, and there's a community here to support you.
Thank you, Janae. And Umra, what do you think would you want to share with the audience about some ways they can support somebody?
Okay, so shortly because it's 7:30, but what was I going to say? Oh, to not insert your own ideas with things. And sorry, I'm like thinking about the time, but it's important to remove that feeling where the youth is feeling like they are being having power and control over them. And this was also mentioned again. So we don't want to recreate those experiences for the person that we are seeking to help. So not only can we help point a person in the right direction, but really in the way that you are interacting with them and being survivor centered and trauma informed, and how you are communicating so that they can meeting them where they are at in their readiness to leave this life. And unfortunately, we can't control that as much as we want it to happen. We can be there to support, but we don't want to engage in any ways to make it to where we're taking the control out of their lives also. So just being there and for the youth to know that you are a person that they can turn to when they are ready can create that long term of support and healing, where they can create their own having empowerment and agency over their lives and rewriting their story.
Thank you to all of our panelists for being here and helping and talk about this. And as Jeanette said, thank you very much, Uma, for being having so much strength and sharing your story with us and your information in particular. And thank you to all our panelists for all the work that you're doing in our community. We put up a lot of different resources in the chat, so you can look for those. But as Janae said, you're not alone. And so reach out for support. The schools are here. Law enforcement's doing work. Rape Trauma Services there to support you, as well as other agencies and Children and Family Services as well. So please look for those resources. Look for the team. But as a community, we can hopefully start to address and make a change. So use those resources. And thank you again, everyone on the panel, for all your important information tonight.
Thank you so much, Jeremy and panelists. This was super engaging and informative for me, being on the other side, listening to you all and seeing all the comments come in. Thank you, those of you who are commenting, asking questions. This will forever live on these links, so please share these on your timelines on social media. We are going to be doing this again on March 10th, as well as April 14th. And we want to encourage you to consider coming back during those times for this adventure called California and Boys Documentary. You can do the same way. You reserve your spot here on the Eventbrite. But if you follow along on any of these platforms on the Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition or the BraveMaker YouTube page, you like and subscribe to all those things, they're going to come right back up. But please go to the Eventbrite, encourage your friends to come. Thank you to Pamela and the Human Trafficking Program from San Mateo County. We're super grateful to be a part of this. And good night, everybody. We'll see you again next week. Thank you, or next month. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Have a good night.